Good morning. I want to thank everyone for being here today for the County Auditors Association of Ohio's press conference on property taxes and tax relief for Ohio citizens. I want to first thank Mayor Fiala, Mayor of Willoughby, for hosting us so graciously here this morning. And he wants me to all let you know that there is some water over here, so if anybody needs a water before or after speaking, or anybody in the audience needs a water, just go ahead and grab one. For our members of the press, our friends in the Fourth Estate, we will do questions after the briefing, and we'll open it up, and you can fire away with questions. Again, my name is Chris Galloway. I am the Lake County Auditor. I currently serve as the second vice president of the CAAO. And this is a continuation of a series of press briefings we've been doing around the state in local media markets to get the word out on property tax reform, our proposals for such, and things that we think that the legislature should be taking up to deal with the property tax crisis that is gripping Ohio currently. I want to thank Carl Keith, who is the Montgomery County Auditor. He has been leading the effort around the state in organizing these and putting them on and being a presenter. So a real yeoman's effort by Carl, and thank you for being here today. I also want to point out I have some other county auditors from around the state here, and I want to point out that why that's important is we have a diverse group of auditors that are interested in the issues we're going to talk about today. So it's not just a suburban county, it's not just a large urban county like Montgomery. You have rural counties. We have Chuck Walder from Geauga County. We have Andrea Weaver from Union County, aka Marysville. So again, Central Ohio. We have Sarah Knox is in the back. Sarah Thorne is in the back from Knox County. And again, rural Southeast Ohio, Central Ohio. So we have folks from all over. And it shows, and it's also a bipartisan thing. So we have both parties represented because this is an issue that affects all of our counties, big or large, rural or urban. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Carl to get us started, and we'll move through the presentation as quickly as we can. Thanks, Carl.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. Thank you for organizing today's event here in Willoughby. As he said, the Auditors Association has been doing a number of these briefings starting back in January. I think Andrea and Matt Nolan, who's the president of our association, joined me in Dayton back in January. And then we've been to Springfield, to Athens, to Toledo, to Youngstown, Cincinnati, Hamilton, Butler County. So we've been moving around the state, and I really appreciate my colleagues. As Chris stated, this is a big state, it's a diverse state, and we represent a lot of different interests. And so we don't always agree on everything, because some things that interest my county may not interest Chris's county, or vice versa. And so it's one of those situations where we worked on these proposals for a year and a half, to come up with 4 recommendations that we think will make a big difference. Again, we've been going around the state. We've been getting a lot of attention within the news media, and we think that's been important in order to draw attention to our proposal. So what I'm going to do is set the stage here for what started this all off. And I guess what really started this all off is sales. When people talk about property values, and we get the auditors are responsible for determining property values for taxing purposes. Those property values are dependent on the real estate market, and the real estate market has been off the charts. I've run out of words to describe it. Hot, on fire, robust, strong, whatever. I've run out of words to describe it, but this kind of shows. This was a story that was in the Dayton Daily News back in November, and you see how the growth over a 10-year period in property values in our area. U.S. median home values increased 67% in the past 5 years. So those values growing like they have in response to a real estate market has really caused it to call attention to what we consider a tax problem. Let's look at values here in the Northeast area. This was in 2023, and this, this didn't happen overnight. It's been going on for some time. It's really been going on more than 5 years. It goes back a number of years, but the last 5 years has really caused us to pay attention to it. So here in 23, the statewide average increase in property values was 30%. Here in the Northeast part of the state, it was 34%. In the last update we did in Montgomery County, our residential values went up 34%. So, it's something that goes across the state, across Ohio, across the country, really. The whole nation is dealing with this in some form or fashion. Important thing to remember that we like to point out that in a lot of cases, not all cases, but a lot of cases, taxes and values are not a one-to-one relationship. A 30%, like in my county, a 34% increase in value did not equate to a 34% increase in taxes because of different factors in the law and the way works out. There's adjustments, and so you don't pay. It's not a one-to-one relationship due to reduction factors. But if you live in an area where the 20 mil floor, schools it's at the 20 mil floor, it has a different impact. And we're going to talk about some of the specifics of that. Again, as auditors have looked at this, and this was a quote from Michael Stenziano, who's the Franklin County auditor, is a guest column that he wrote, appeared in the Columbus Dispatch. We said Ohio doesn't have a value problem. A lot of people will suggest, well, we need to change the way we determine values. Our position is we don't have a value problem. The values are what they are. They're in response to a real estate market that most of us have never lived through before. We don't have a value problem. We have a tax problem. And that's the things that we wanted to address. So several bills. In the last session of the General Assembly, there were several pieces of legislation that were introduced to address property tax relief. None of them were enacted. They did establish, the legislature did establish this joint committee on property tax review and reform. They spent a year studying this issue. Our association testified to this committee, as well as other organizations, other stakeholders around the state, again, with some of the recommendations you're going to hear from us today. And when it was all said and done, they did absolutely nothing. When the committee released its report at the end of the year in 2024, they basically said, well, here's a whole list of things that could be done. We don't recommend any of them. So it really left us, it's really frustrating. I think we're all frustrated by this whole issue. Again, this was a story in the Dayton Daily News, property tax relief is dead. So that's kind of what motivated us, the Auditors Association, to come out and talk about our 4 proposals out in public. And so these are the 4 solutions that we've come up with. Expand the homestead exemption, and we're going to talk about these in detail. Expand the homestead exemption program, eliminate the non-business credit and expand the owner occupancy credit, limit the growth in revenue received by school districts due to reappraisal changes, that's the 20 mil floor issue, and then create a menu of targeted relief. Am I going next?
I think, well, flip the thing. We'll see. It's you or me.
Let's see who wants to go next.
It's you.
It's me? Oh, okay. So I'll talk the main issue. The main thing that we really want to do is talk about the homestead exemption and the 20 mil floor. But I'll talk about these other issues as well because they're important. The state of Ohio, the owner occupancy credit, the non-business credit, it's a 2.5% credit that every owner occupancy home receives. That was established in the law. 1976, I believe, is when that 2.5% credit was established. 1976, and hasn't been adjusted since. Again, this is one of those things that we think is a no-brainer. That should have been adjusted long ago. It should have been tied to inflation long ago, but it hasn't. And so that's one thing that we think is a no-brainer, to reestablish the 10% credit on owner occupancy property. We think those are things that would make a difference to most homeowners, and it's something the legislature can do immediately and provide immediate relief. And so those are the credits we're talking about here. Same thing with this. again, this was just some examples. We could, even if we increase that 2.5 to 5, would save a significant amount of money for most of our property owners. The other issue, the targeted relief. These are ideas that, again, some of our auditors have, and not all of our auditors have, but some of our auditors would favor doing income tax credits or tax deferrals. What they want is to have the legislature give us the authority or the tools to be able to do those types of things that work in our own communities. They may not work statewide. Not everyone may not want to do some of these things, but there are auditors who would like to address those things, and they would like the legislature to give us the authority to work on those things if it makes sense. So that's what that's about. I think you're up.
All right.
All right. Thanks. Thank you.
He might be back. So one of the big things that's been discussed a lot as it relates to the hot property market has been the effect of the diminishing of the homestead exemption and the impact it's having on our seniors. For those who don't know, the homestead exemption it allows senior citizens that are living in their home to shield part of the value of their home from taxation, and that results in a credit on their real estate tax bill. Examples of annual savings, okay, what that means. And just these are Northeast Ohio. Mahoning County, $450, Lake County, $460, Lorain County, $427. Those are sort of blended averages from across each of these counties and what a senior on a homestead exemption could expect to get in terms of a credit on their tax bill. Now, because of the increased costs in the real estate market, because of values going way up in terms of in the last 6 years, the value of that credit, along with inflation, it has reduced itself. So like 5-6 years in Lake County, that credit for homestead for a senior would have been somewhere a little bit north of $700, about $720. So at a time when their values are skyrocketing, those same forces are reducing the value of the homestead credit. So seniors are getting hammered from both ends. Their taxes are going up because of, in essence, property taxes are, of course, unrealized gains, and they're not looking to sell or move, so it's not an investment property. So their value and their taxes are going up, and then at the same time, their credit for their homestead is going down. So they're getting squeezed on both ends. So that value has steadily declined, and in 2012, the budget that was passed, in order to help balance the state budget, they tied homestead exemption to income. So you had to have an income which is currently $40,000. You have to be $40,000 or below in income to even qualify. Okay. Prior to 2012, you just had to be 65, and you got the credit. So what that did effectively was it took folks that were already on it were grandfathered, but anybody new that was going to apply, you had to have an income below $40,000. And look, that took out a large segment of folks who immediately did not become eligible for the credit. So first off, we've tossed a bunch of seniors aside and said, sorry, you don't qualify because you make the princely sum of $41,000 a year in retirement income. So here's an example of Lake County, just the last couple of years, just to show you the last 2 years and how it is, because of the effective tax rate and how it's affecting the credit. Now extrapolate that back 6 years to my point and how it has been reduced. Here's a great picture of Carl. One of the main thrusts that we have advocated for is reform of the homestead program. Increasing the amount that the credit shields on your property value, increasing that significantly so that the credit goes up, increasing, if the legislature decides they would like to keep an income qualifier, you have to increase that. And the answer is that probably has to get to somewhere around maybe the medium household income of $76,000, $77,000 in the state of Ohio to get more seniors eligible to be able to qualify for the homestead. at the end of the day, the state of Ohio spends a lot of money in social service programs through senior levies, state programs, and otherwise, all focused, and in healthcare, all focused on trying to keep seniors in their homes, right? And that's the right thing to do. We want to do that. If you've paid for your home, we want you to be able to stay in your home as long as you absolutely can, right? But our tax policy is hurting the thing that we're spending social money on trying to cure, right? We want people to stay in their homes, but now we have a tax policy that punishes them. So this, in my mind, goes hand in hand with us helping keep our seniors in their homes as long as they can. That's good for their quality of life, that's good for their health care, that's good for their state of mind. It's better for the state of Ohio. I'm going to hand it over to Andrea Weaver, who's going to talk about the 20 mil floor. But a reform, I can tell you, I do want to talk on, the Senate passed a version of the budget yesterday that has an increase in the homestead numbers in terms of credit and income. It's woefully pathetic. The number of people in Lake County that might additionally qualify based on those numbers might be the number of people in this room. I mean, going from 40,000 to 42,005 in income is not a real reform. That is a reform in name only. So with that, I want to hand it over to Andrea Weaver, Union County Auditor, and she's going to talk about probably the biggest thing that we're proposing, the 20 mil floor and reform of that.
Thanks, Chris. Again, I am Andrea, and I'm from Marysville. Anybody know where Marysville is? We're a bedroom community of Columbus. We're a contiguous county to Franklin. I'm grateful to be here. The 20 mil floor, in essence, was created in 1977 by the General Assembly to give schools, public schools in Ohio, a minimum level of funding. That's essentially what it was. And it probably was a good idea at that time. I think that nobody, and not to throw anyone under the bus, I think nobody that was in government or advising government at that time would have envisioned the level of property value increases that we are experiencing now, 50, 40, man, I'm old. High school. How many years later, good night, Irene. Who would have thought that property values would have gone like they have all these years later? So the 20 mil floor, as I opened up with, is designed to make sure that all school districts, public school districts in Ohio have this minimum level of funding. And the way it works is it basically adjusts those general fund levies, which is inside millage that they are assigned. Anybody know how long inside millage has been part of Ohio law? Gold star? Nobody? 1933. This is a law that's been on the books for almost 100 years, inside millage. And it is a way to fund all kinds of local governments, including established school districts. So part of the calculation includes inside millage, and then the other operating levies that district may have. Now they have to have voted more than 20. But the way tax policy in Ohio works, it says that when values go up, those rates get readjusted so that you're only collecting about what you did the year before, what the voters intended when that levy was created. So that bucket of levies for every school district is readjusted every year, because even in a non-update year, values change. There are new construction homes, people tear down, there are board of revision filings. So in Union County today, we are in the midst of a 6-year update, the sexennial update, but we changed values last year a little, everywhere in the county. So the point is that every year values change a little, even in non-update years, and those rates of that core group of levies are readjusted by the Department of Taxation. That is their job, one of the things that they do. And they then send to all of us at the county level what those rates are going to be now, given that increase or change in value. Well, if that change in rate drops down below that minimum 20 mils, then the Department of Taxation kicks each one of those, not inside mills, that's fixed, but the other levies will kick them up just a smidge so that when they add down, they come back up to just 20. That makes sure that that district gets 20 mils, even though if the value increases that district experienced forced those fixed rate levies to be readjusted according to Ohio law. So that's the 20 mil floor. Clear as mud, as my dad would have said. It makes sure that they get that 20 mil, that minimum of 20 mils if there's more than 20 mils voted. Having said that, current law, which is what I just explained, has allowed for, unintentionally, allowing almost a 1-for-1 tax increase if a school's already at that floor and their district, as Carl pointed out earlier, went up 34% in value. they would see a 34% increase in those taxes because they are already at the 20. The rates are not going to get readjusted lower. You're going to see a significant significant increase in your school levies. Now, this wouldn't apply to the other levies in your county. Fire, cemetery, all those are all non-school levies. Where this is only addressed the school portion of your effective tax rate. But what is the largest entity, largest placeholder in any effective tax rate in Ohio? School. You know, in Union County, it's 68, 70, 71%, depending on the school district. So you look at all your levies, whether they're county levies, it's 911, Board DD, the health department, all the things that we love and fund, plus the school district get added up to this number at the bottom. And so the 20 mil floor ensures, now with these rising property values, that if you've got a district that is already over 20 mils legitimately, and you've got an increase in value, you're going to see an increase in tax relative to that value change. So what our suggestion is to control, if you will, the ceiling on what that ceiling and floor, a bit of architectural humor there, since we do properties, is that you could reduce that increase to the point of inflation. Instead of, if you've got a 34% increase in value in your school district as a result of value change, instead of that school seeing that large of an increase, it would be adjusted to only seeing whatever the current inflation rate is. So anywhere from 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on the budget at that time in the country and in the state. The devil's in the details as to which inflation rate you're looking at, probably for the state. Either way, it would be subject and held to the level of inflation, so that growth would not be as great as what the value change would be. So that is a large component to what CAAO has been preaching, discussing, saying the 20 mil floor has value in the current school funding formula that we're tied to in this state. And I think in 1977 it had merit. Probably in years up until the last decade, it has had merit, but it has not, I think, turned out to quite what the General Assembly thought it would be in 77. So our suggestion, as those of us who do know, I don't know a lot about a lot of things, I know a lot about property tax, and your colleagues do as well, that this is a great way to limit that growth in property tax associated with school levies by limiting the growth of the 20 mil floor to just an inflationary factor. It would still allow growth for those schools. There are many schools with colleagues that are not in the room that live in other parts of the state that say that growth of their property value system in their county, their schools rely on that. They might be poorer schools, smaller district schools. You know, the school formula relies on how much income a school district can provide based on the valuation of its district. That's part of the school funding formula. Right or wrong, constitutional or not, that's the way it is. And you have a number of school districts that don't have as higher property values. And so the 20 mil floor has helped them to meet their expenses. We just feel that it's kind of not what was intended, and this would have still allowed for them to have growth in their revenue without having such egregious growth due to property value changes as well. I'm going to move on and see if there's, do I know how to do this? Forward. Oh, this is a comparison. You can see schools at the floor. This is how much their taxes would have gone up if for those that are at the floor, they're not at the floor. An increase in value of almost the same 37, 38. Schools not at the floor only saw a 5% increase. Schools that were at the floor saw 14. This is Valley View. Is that one of your districts?
These are mine. Those are Montgomery.
So anyway, we believe, and this has been something that we've been preaching now for, as Carl said, almost 18 months, that it makes complete sense because it maintains the foundational views of the 20 mil floor as a law, while also helping to make sure that those districts still receive an increase in their revenue based on inflationary increases in value. This is more of what we as an association are doing. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, and I would just to follow up on what Andrea said as it relates to Lake County and our Lake County folks here in the audience. I'll give you a great example. Willoughby Eastlake Schools was well below, after the revaluation, well below the 20 mil floor. And so property taxes in that district resulted in about $8 million in new revenue, unvoted tax revenue from taxpayers to the school district, about an $8 million windfall, okay? So that meant that property taxes for those folks in Willoughby Eastlake School District, which on the west side of Lake County saw some of the largest valuation increases, saw their taxes also go up the most in the county. So to the point where their taxes were increasing, 27, 28, 29%. As an example, because I have Mr. Filipiak here from Mentor, Mentor School District is not at the floor, was not below the floor. And the average residential tax increase in Mentor washed out to about 7%. So you can imagine that when it comes time for our BOR hearings this year that we're having and people are challenging their values, we have far less from Mentor than we do have at the school districts that were at or well below the 20 mil floor. And as Andrea said, the market was unanticipated in 1978 when that was passed. No one could have expected, over a 6-year cycle, 47, 48% value increases. On a normal historical real estate cycle, the floor was working pretty well, right? If you have a 5-year, or over a 3-year period, you have a 5% increase in values. It doesn't register the same way, when you get to nearly 50% does. Back to the General Assembly and some of the stuff they've done, again, because we've been doing this, talking about this so long, the House has passed, as Carl had mentioned, a whole bunch of bills last cycle. Some of them had some good ideas. Most of them had a lot of bad ideas because they focused on valuation and trying to short circuit that. We were able to really engage and sort of help educate the legislature on some of these things. Recently, we did join a coalition of the Ohio Realtors and the Ohio Chamber of Commerce to fight for property tax reform. Because we've got, since we started this roadshow, we have some interesting developments. There is now a constitutional amendment being proposed in Ohio to abolish property taxes in Ohio that is currently gathering signatures around the state. Don't know where that will go and what that will, whether that could be on the ballot this year. I think probably less likely based on the, 400,000 to 500,000 signatures they need, but perhaps next year. Additionally, last week, House Bill 355 was introduced, and it is asking for the elimination of inside millage for every taxing authority other than townships. And so that is currently being debated in Columbus. There is discussion that they might try to fold that into conference committee, and we can speak on the ins and outs of what that might do. But I know that we have a lot of our municipal friends here that have very, very strong opinions about eliminating inside millage without a game plan on what comes next. And I think that that's the biggest challenge, is that in a place like Lake County, that inside millage funds the Sheriff's Department. It funds our Veterans Services Department. It is a critical component, a piece of our county budget. And so to wipe it out with nothing to follow it, Lake County would be looking instantly, come January 1, at a $9 million hole in our budget and have to figure out how that would get rectified. Additionally, and this is one of a personal interest, Representative Thomas introduced House Bill 309, which is Budget Commission reform. My association happily calls this the Galloway Plan, poking fun at me, but that's okay. And basically, every county has a budget commission that should be reviewing the tax budgets of all the taxing authorities and reviewing what is being raised and spent on an annual basis, and whether those projections in terms of the dollars raised and being spent, whether those levies are justified. So I'm going to turn it over to Chuck Walder. He's going to talk about this and what he does in Geauga County and talk about the House Bill 309 reforms.
Thanks, Chris. Again, my name is Chuck Walder. I'm the Geauga County Auditor, also known as the pointy end of the Budget Commission spear. So, and just for a point of clarity, in the previous slide, I believe we referred to House Bill 355. I think it's actually 335, if I'm not mistaken. So if anybody's looking it up and finding a problem, that's why. To summarize, I think you will find, as always, with 88 counties, you ask any auditor in 88 counties a potential solution, you'll get 88 answers, right? Because everybody has a different environment. I'm happy to see that my peer auditors come from a variety of different types of counties. So there are some rural like Geauga, there are some more suburban, and some that are a mix. And as a result of that, though, there is still one common denominator in all of that. And that is the public expects us to watch their money in the Treasury. And they expect us to protect that money. And what they don't expect to happen is when things occur that cause for windfalls of money, whether it's due to a rise of property values causing an increase in inside millage or an increase in the floor adjustment, they don't expect it to just increase people's bank accounts. So in essence, the reform that we're asking for the Budget Commission is to put in clear guardrails, to clearly define the role of the Budget Commission, to protect the Treasury, and to require that all people that ask the public for money can represent that need in the form of some sort of a document or a plan of expenditure. If they can't do that, we believe the money should go back to the public. And I don't think that's an unreasonable request. I've yet to find any member of the public who's objected to us doing that. So in Geauga, in the last 8 years, we have returned upwards of $20 million to the public, simply by saying you have excess money in your bank and you have not demonstrated a need for that money. I think that's reasonable. We do that with our home budgets. Why wouldn't we require public entities to do the exact same thing? And these are the measures that we're asking the legislators to consider and to put in place so that these checks and balances can be empowered to auditors across the state to decide whether they choose to bring that before the Budget Commission and exercise these abilities and take corrective action to protect the public's money. So again, there'll be some areas in Ohio where the Budget Commission will choose not to go hard on some of these policies. And that's their prerogative. We're not dictating how people should operate, but we want to have the tools in the tool set so that if you do want to protect the public and you do believe it's their desire for you to do that, you have the ammunition to take that on. The next slide, I think, is somebody else. Yes, Chris?
Sure.
Whatever.
Carl, do you want it?
I can start. As Chris mentioned, we've been doing this now for a couple of years, year and a half at least, and for a long time. I think the citizens in Ohio have been calling for some type of relief for some time. Every time I do a property value update in my county and go out and talk to property owners about what we're doing. I've been the county auditor in Montgomery County now for 25 years, so I've gone through a number of updates. Every time I go out there, one of the questions I get from people said, well, I thought the Supreme Court declared this whole thing unconstitutional 30 years ago, and they did, but nothing's been done. Or the other comment I'll get is, well, I thought the Ohio Lottery was supposed to fund our schools, and well, money from the Ohio Lottery does, but it's not enough. So, this has been going on, and the frustration from the public has been going on for a long, long time. And so this group from up here in this community, a group has been working and developed a plan to put a referendum on the ballot. And this is the actual language of the proposed amendment that they're asking to be on the ballot. It's pretty simple, no real property shall be taxed. No law shall impose any taxes on real property. That's pretty simple. And, of course, one of the things that those of us who are tasked with administering these laws are concerned about, okay, well, the devil's in the details with that, right? I mean, if that were to be passed and become an amendment to the Ohio Constitution, well, okay, well, how do we implement that? And how quickly do we do it? And how do we replace the revenue that's generating and the services that are being provided? How do we function without that? So those are questions that would have to be asked. But there's some movement for there. I know I haven't seen anyone in my county circulating petitions, but I know some of the surrounding counties said that they've been circulating petitions, and I guess we have heard some talk of people having petitions in our county. But this group is out there, Citizens for Property Tax Reform. The language that I showed you was approved by the ballot board back in May. And so, but that, as Chris mentioned, they have to collect 413,000 valid signatures from voters in 44 of Ohio's 88 counties, and they have to collect those and submit those to the state by July 1st. And you know, what is today? The 13th? 12th? 12th. You know, that's a big task. And I've been around and seen referendum issues before, and you know, think about it, for gambling, for marijuana, for abortion, you know, all the different types of referendum issues that have been put on the ballot in recent years. You know, those things sometimes take years before they can actually reach to the ballot. So the idea that this might get on the ballot for this year, you know, I think it's not very likely. But it really speaks, though, to the frustration I think that the public has, and the motivation that they're trying to encourage the legislature to do something. You know, you've been talking about this, you introduce bills, you don't vote, do something. And again, that's what, as county auditors, we've come up with our proposals that we think will do something, and that's what we're trying to encourage, something to get done. In response to this, this isn't necessarily the right answer. In my county, to make up for the lost revenue from the property tax in my county, we'd have to increase the sales tax. If we went to that, we'd have to increase the sales tax in Montgomery County by 11%. So to make our total tax rate 18.5%, something like that in our county, which is, you know, just not a solution. That is just not a solution. 355?
It's 335.
335?
All these numbers are blending together.
Yeah,
It's getting hard to keep track.
Do we need to say, you want to say anything more about that?
No, I think we've covered that, and I would actually just add to what Carl says about the constitutional amendment that's currently floating around. He's spot on. This is a citizen revolt because the legislature has not dealt with these issues in a timely fashion. In fact, had these 4 areas been implemented 3 to 4 years ago that the auditors are recommending, had these been implemented just even 2 years ago, most of the tax increases that are causing most of the pain and the screaming from the public would not have occurred. And so you would have had a cap on the 20 mil floor. You would have had an increased homestead that would have been indexed to inflation and shielding more of people's home values from seniors' home values from taxation. Their taxes would not have skyrocketed. A lot of these things, budget commission reform, it would allow local communities to better police and be the watchdog that Chuck talked about. Those things, if this had all been implemented prior to, much of the pain that we're experiencing now would have been avoided, and probably diffuses the idea of a constitutional amendment to, you know, remove all property taxes across the state. Now, keep in mind, if you get rid of all the property taxes across the state, you're looking at about $22 billion annually. And so in order to cover that, the Department of Taxation has done some back-of-the-napkin analysis, and if you were to make no reforms and just tried to swap your revenue, you'd be looking at around, in terms of state average of taxation for sales tax, not including your local sales taxes, around 18.5%. So that means in Lake County, you know, your sales tax would be around 20 cents on the dollar. And I got to tell you, if you are a retail or commercial operation in a county that rings the state of Ohio, okay, that will decimate all the retail operations and businesses in those counties. Because if you live in Hamilton County, you're going to cross over the bridge to Kentucky. All the stores in Hamilton County are done. Those jobs are lost. Ashtabula County, you're just going to drive to Erie. Mahoning County, you're going to drive to Pennsylvania and do your shopping. You're not going to shop in Ohio. Think of the devastation of all those businesses. The point of that is that these sort of extreme broad stroke positions of eliminate all property taxes and then not have a plan on what comes next is really dangerous in terms of how you govern Ohio. And to make it clear, we have not, as an association, taken an official position on the constitutional amendment. I've met on a couple occasions with the folks that are leading that effort and stressed to them that the problem is that there's nothing on the backside of the amendment. There's no proposed, this is how we would restructure government. These are the taxes that we would recommend replace the property taxes. It's an abyss, right? And I think, my opinion only, that ultimately voters would not vote in favor of the abyss, because knowing what comes next is a big part of that equation. So I am going to go ahead and open it up to questions. First from the press, if I could, because I know you guys are on a deadline. If you guys have any questions of what we've talked about here, there's a lot of detail. Feel free to ask myself or any of the other, we can bring everybody up if need be. Does anyone in the media have any questions?
My purpose is it would just be easier to talk to you one-on-one afterwards.
Okay. You got it. Anybody else? Chad?
I've worked with Auditor Walder and Auditor Galloway consistently with Jog, especially around elections. But so these proposals, how likely do you think the legislature will listen? Because straight talk, we hear a lot about what this should be done and a lot of rhetoric, and then a lot of people who sat on local boards, could probably guess what I'm thinking of, lash against Columbus, the state, that's all you ever hear. Then they might ascend politically and then kind of ignore some of those, or I should say, those those philosophies change drastically. So how likely do you think the CAAO, like the proposals will be listened to and move forward with the, like I think Carl said it's mid-June.
I mean, we know the Senate passed a version of their version of the budget yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to go to conference committee, and what comes out of that, none of us know. For our local government friends here, you probably all ought to be afraid. I think that there will be this is just my guess, some type of 20 mil floor reform. My guess is there will be some budget commission reform. What exactly that looks like, based on current legislation, we just don't know. I can tell you, we've been told by the members of the legislature they have zero interest and no desire to do anything substantive with the homestead exemption. And the reason for that is that directly comes out of their budget. And so despite what you hear about rhetoric during election time about, oh, we want to help seniors, we want to do this, they are refusing to do anything of substance on that.
I guess
That doesn't mean the fact that doesn't change that we're going to continue to talk about it.
Right.
We're going to keep pounding the desk on that. Because if you look at Ohio and then you look at other states that we're competitive, we are not competitive on that type of program with other states. Other states have a much healthier homestead exemption. Some call it different things, but their equivalency are much more robust than what Ohio does. Much more robust. Compared to other states, we're punishing our seniors too much. But to this point, the legislature has turned a deaf ear to that. So I don't think homestead's going to happen. But I think there will be 920 reforms, 20 mil floor reforms. I think there will be some budget commission reforms. And I think that looking at it from a long-term standpoint, it's Chuck mentioned to me earlier, he's an engineer, and you do one thing at a time, right? You take a look and see how it reacts and how it, what you're building or what you're designing, right? That might be a good first start for us, right? To be able to get some basic stuff going. But I think our association expects that this is just the beginning, that this isn't end with the budget, because there's more legislation out there after the budget that's in the pipeline that we have to talk about and address and educate legislators and the public on. And I think this is going to be a process, especially with the constitutional amendment out there sort of floating like the sword of Damocles over the legislature, that it's, between now and next year, this conversation is going to only heat up more.
Just to piggyback on top of that, we have, as far as we're concerned, this fight continues well beyond the budget. Because I don't think some of these issues about property tax relief will find their way into the budget. You know, these are some standalone bills and legislation that will be taken up, I think, later in the year. So we have Union County has scheduled a briefing that we're going to do later in July 25th. Knox County has one scheduled in September. So, you know, the legislature is going to do whatever they're going to do with the budget, and then they're going to go on summer recess. So there's still time, I think, for us to continue to lobby and advocate for some of these positions. And I'm still optimistic, and I'm still, again, I've been fighting for some of this for a long time. And you just have to persevere when you're in the service that we do.
Yeah, I call it, we just have to keep chopping wood.
Can I address what Chris said about Homestead? He made the comment about Homestead that, you know, the state has to fund it. If you don't understand how levies work, you don't really know what that means. Keep in mind that all the property taxes you pay, every dime stays in your county. None of it goes to Columbus. None of it. Your cemetery levies, your fire levies, your school levies, they all fund local stuff. Keep in mind those levies now have credits, the 2.5 and the 10. So if you've got a fire levy that's going to generate 5 mills, I live in Paris Township. Paris Township wants the full 5 mills for their fire levy. So for those 2 credits, guess what? The property owner, Bob and Betty Buckeye, on a 1 mil of value, 1 mil on 100,000 of value, it's $35. Well, now you've got $4 and some change in credit, the 2.5 and the 10%. So where does Paris Township? Do they lose out on that 12.5% credit for all the taxpayers in their township that qualify for that? The answer is no. They get the $31 from when I do settlement, when people pay their taxes, the county sends that township that $31. The other 4 and some change comes from the state. They make whole those levies so that the local levying agencies receive the full $35 on that 1 mil, 100,000 of value for that purpose. So when the comments were made that the state, you know, what was said to me last year was there's no appetite in the legislature to fund additional tax credits. For them to fund additional homestead, like Chris made the comment in the Senate bill, the Senate version, it increases the income level from $40,000 to $4,250. Like that's insulting in my opinion. You know what additional seniors are going to get scooped in and qualify because of that income. But if they would take it to 50, 60, 70, 80,000, guess what? A lot more people would qualify, which means the check they have to cut to those local levying agencies for the greater experience of homestead credits being taken would go up. The state has to fund the 2.5, the 10%, and the homestead portions of the individual's credit, their tax bill, so that that levying agency gets the full amount that was approved at the ballot box. Does that make sense? So the full 1 mil, $100,000 of value is $35. Paris Township's fire levy needs to get the full 35, and they do. They just get it from 2 sources. They get it from the county, and they get it from the state. And the state's going, we don't want to send anymore. So that's why they don't want to fund any more tax credits or help for seniors by expanding the program that would then require them to cut more checks. Does that make sense? That's their participation in our property tax system. And yet I said this to my state representative on Tuesday, why, if you don't receive any of our tax revenue, why do you meddle in tax policy? Sales tax is the worst tax to base consistent government needs on. Elemental tax policy. That's why property tax is the most secure, the most dependable, the most reliable source of revenue. It's why how many counties in the state use their inside millage, which is a fixed amount, to fund their debt, to secure their debt. What bank is going to loan money to a county when the revenue that they're going to use to pay that debt payment fluctuates? Sales tax is nothing if not fluctuating. So tax policy element 101 says sales tax should not be what you base your budget on. And that's what is not appearing in the constitutional amendment and what others in the House are trying to say. So I just felt like having you understand, we do this for a living, you don't, to understand what does that mean when the state helps with those credits, they fund the other part of the credit that the individuals are taking. Does that make sense?
Well said. And I think ultimately, let's not kid ourselves, you're not going to have real property tax reform in Ohio until you address the school property tax and funding portion. Because it's, depending on, you know, the county and the district, you know, it can be 58 to 70% of somebody's tax bill. So until we are ultimately willing to do something with that funding formula, substantial, everything else we're doing is, admittedly, it's Band-Aids. It's trying to help folks within the current construct, when ultimately the real reform is probably going to have to involve changing, to some degree, the school funding. So, yep.
Yes, with the changes being proposed to the 2004 here, has this proposal been made with any input from school boards, school treasurers, superintendents, anyone kind of working in that general area?
Yeah, we have engaged, our membership has engaged heavily, both locally and at the state level, with the school treasurers and school administrators. To be frank, they don't like it. They don't like our proposal. And think about it from a school board standpoint, a school district standpoint. If you have the ability, under the current law, I'll use our school district that we're in here now, if you have the ability to get $8 million in additional funding versus only getting $1.1 million, which one do you want? Right? So what we have argued with them is that our proposal is reasonable. It allows for an increase in their funding revenue. It does not allow for windfalls like what we've seen in the last couple of years. And we have warned that, that they should seriously consider our proposal to support, because the alternative that might come out of the legislature could be far more damaging to them and far more punitive. I watched our reporters writing frantically. Any other questions? And we can do questions afterwards if that also is something that you guys would like. We'll have all these auditors here for that very purpose. If there's nothing else, I want to thank everyone for attending, for everyone at home, out in the cyber world, watching our Facebook live stream. We did videotape this, and we will look to put it out on various platforms so it can be shared. If any of our local partners want to also share it on their websites, etc. Thank you, everybody, for coming today.